You're listening to episode 175 of the Super League Pod. Get ready for a bumper Easter edition as we go through 2 rounds of Super League, 2 rounds of the Championship, a little bit of news, quite a bit of feedback, and 2 quizzes too. Strap yourselves in, kids. It's Super League Pod. Welcome everyone to episode 175 of the Super League Pod. If it sounds a little bit different, that's because we are recording in person this week, and I'm joined for the Easter special by Alan Cale.
Hello everybody.
Welcome to the Filed.
Thank you. The glorious Filed.
Thanks for making the trip over. It's really exciting. We're using a new microphone, so if anyone's got problems with the sound, it's because I don't know how to use this, what the right setup is for this microphone yet, but we will hopefully sound very clear to everyone.
I'm sure you'll let us know if we don't. So.
Well, I always hear, yeah. Yeah. But we did it, that it was sounding good last week from someone, so that was good. We'll get to the shout out and feedbacks. What we're going to do this week, we're going to find out who the Chris Kendall lookalike was. So everyone can get the phones out ready to Google image search this bloke when we get to him. Because Tim finally remembered about halfway through the week. We're going to have a quick run through the news. The main focus on that will be the Giants coaching situation. We've got a couple of Giants fans' views on that. And then we'll run through the jam-packed double-header Easter schedule. So we're going to start with the shout-out and feedback. So it was Cutthroat Jake. John got in touch at cut_throat_Jake, and he said, sat at my desk in a dreary Huddersfield with the Super League Pod to brighten my day at nearly 3 hours is this week's the longest episode. Great value for money. It's certainly one of the best sounding. Well done to Il Gradio. So that's the me and Tim combination. I don't know what, well, maybe we must be Il Kale or
Il Gradio just sounds good. Yeah, I mean
Il Mungo.
If anyone would like a refund, we will be publishing details of your claim form very shortly.
But yeah, last week 3 hours, longest episode I think is longer than 3 hours, but it was the longest this year so far, and they've been building up in length this year. It's been creeping and creeping and creeping, and the song on the end obviously tips them over sometimes longer than I'm expecting them to get. Colin Render got in touch. This was on the lookalikes topic. So Colin said, Chris Kendall lookalike, is it Matthew Bainton? He was in You, Me and the Apocalypse, The Wrong Man's, Horrible Histories, and Yonderland, amongst loads of other things, I think, because he was in Gavin and Stacey as well.
Yeah, and just stay tuned, everybody, because my recommends is, having seen Matthew Bainton, it reminded me, actually, of recommend that you can listen to later on. But yeah, I've got to say that there was a likeness there. I was ready to kind of say, yeah.
I was satisfied too.
Yeah, I was happy with that.
But Tim remembered the person. He's called someone called Tom Stourton. Although when I've looked him up on IMDb, his major credit was the Thomas and Friends, the new Thomas and Friends, which your Daisy's probably a little bit old for that series, maybe. But I know that my some of my friends' sons watch Thomas and Friends, so if you've got young kids, then you'll probably have heard his voice, but his acting work pretty thin on the ground. He was in a series called, it looks like he was in a series called Siblings with the lass who plays Oregon in Fresh Meat, and also is in Call the Midwife, one of the nurses in Call the Midwife now. Okay. Although, spoiler alert, she died.
There wasn't enough of a pause there. People would have been reaching for their pause
buttons. Well, it finished 3 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
People will watch it. Anyway, so there you go. Do you want to read out Dave's? Before you do, yeah. I apologise because I thought Dave sent me a tweet and then deleted it. So I admonished him a little bit for that. And then it turns out he sent me an email and I've just forgotten about it. But I found it. So this is on the theme of sporting injuries. Because these keep rolling along. And actually, there was another funny injury. One of the... Was it... Frogmore sent us a UFC fighter, I assume, who basically tore apart his knee, having to change directions quickly in the garden to grab his daughter when he was playing with his daughter. So there you go. But this is what happened to David Cantrell.
Yeah, okay. So this is from Dave. So my best sporting injury was back when I did rock climbing. Obviously, yet another thing that Dave's into. I'd spent the whole day climbing at Stanage Edge. Is that how you pronounce it? Stanage Edge?
Yes.
With no problems. And broke my ankle walking back to the car at the end of the day when I put my foot down a rabbit hole. No mobile coverage, and I was the only driver in the group, so I had to drive myself to the hospital using only my left foot. Now, as a non-driver myself, I can't really comment on how difficult that is, but I know that you tend to need two to do that unless it's an automatic. But and your left's on the wrong side, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's Dave. Like he's
did he cross his legs?
He probably could carry the car. Even with a broken leg and a broken arm. No, that's pretty impressive that he managed to do what is considered a fairly hazardous activity.
Yeah, generally.
And come out of that completely fine, and then do what's considered a pretty standard activity of walking. Managed to shatter his ankle. So that's a good one. So if anyone else has any more stories like that, do you have any injury stories?
It's not really sporting related.
It doesn't have to be.
The only thing I've ever really done that was really particularly bad. I was never adventurous as a kind of a teenager. I was kind of quite traditional and kind of didn't really take too many risks with stuff really. But with peer pressure, I did kind of go on a what do you call it? A kind of ropes type thing, like a monkey swing type thing.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
And I wasn't
a rope swing
type thing. So I really wasn't used to these, and obviously it was very unofficial. It was in a woods somewhere, and I managed to lose my grip at literally the worst point, and I must have fallen 20 feet at least, and completely shattered my wrist, broke both bones, and it's still kind of got a kind of slightly weird look to it now. It's always been a weakness. Yeah, so literally the first thing I'd ever done like that, and it's the only time I've ever kind of spent any time in hospital.
Did you get it pinned?
It wasn't bad enough to be pinned. I was kind of, maybe I was of the right age. I was only 13, so I was still growing, and everything was kind of fixed itself easily enough. I
was actually telling one of my little sisters last night the story when I broke my wrist, about similar age. And
it's the age you do that stuff, isn't it?
Perfect. This is back to classic things that obviously are no use on a podcast. But do you see that little white scar there on my wrist?
I can confirm to listeners that there is a little scar. Yes.
Yeah, that's where the rod went in my arm, and it went to about there because it broke about 3 inches up, completely broke. And I remember like the X-ray was basically an arm on top of an arm. Yeah. It was that like much of a break, yeah.
The only thing I really remember from it particularly was that I remember seeing the X-ray, because you do have a slight, once it's been kind of reset, you've got a morbid fascination with it, haven't you? So it definitely broke him more of a shard, and it was maybe a couple of centimetres from piercing the skin. It was really quite a bad one. But yeah, that's probably my closest sporting injury story. I never did anything on the
sport.
So
you were actually doing something out of your comfort zone that was physical activity.
And that put me off, and I never did that again. So there you go, yeah.
Fair enough. Right, so last one on the sort of feedback and shout-outs that's coming from the listeners, and it was a Facebook message that came in from Rich Wilkinson over the weekend, and Rich says, "Now then, lads, just a quick rant this week to highlight the Sky post-match interviews in the Wigan Saints game. Angela Powers probing both Burgess and Wayne for comment on reffing decisions influencing the outcome of the game. Totally out of order by Powers and Sky. Sky are as much to blame as anybody in the game for stirring up anti-ref sentiment. Sky continue with having strange anti-ref agenda, having Cummings on the panel questioning calls, Eddie talking shit about calls, and highlighted by the post-match comments by Powers. It's also bang out of order questioning players on the ref right after the heat of battle, especially after a loss, and is massively disrespectful to do the same to coaches before they have had time to even get off the pitch and have a second look at any calls. Very bad form from Sky, in my opinion."
It's a fair point. Without jumping ahead to Monday's game, I think there's a classic example of that, isn't there? In Barber's try.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't think there'd be a single person, either in the ground or on television, that had an issue with that. First of all, it looked absolutely fine, and it looked fine when they played it at real time as well.
But even Cummins sort of defended that one, didn't he?
It did. To be fair, it
took 4 angles with lots of slow motions for us to even see it.
But why are they looking for these kind of micro things that are slight errors? Why are we looking for these? Oh, look, the referee's made a mistake there, and it seems it's picking and it's using the technology in the way that it's not really meant to be used. In my opinion, it's
to create a narrative, isn't it? We had our video ref section, so we've moved that on. Even though this weekend probably brought a lot of video ref stuff in the fan reviews, I've not read them yet, but I'm assuming it has. If anyone watched the Catalan Huddersfield game, I'm sure we'll be talking about video referee decisions.
Probably,
but we moved that to one side. But now this is our media kind of going the wrong way about the refereeing, because Super League Pod has always taken pretty much the stance of referees make mistakes. Yeah, sometimes they influence games. Sometimes as fans we're pissed off by them, and that's totally understandable. However, they're not trying to make mistakes, and we shouldn't be making it about the referees. And I've loads of times thought, should we do a section where we get, let's say, Paul O'Brien, ex-referee in the North West Counties League, who listens to the show, should we get him involved and do a section trying to clear things up and stuff? But I think with the best of intentions of that, you always end up with the Cummings farce that you've got now. Because Cummings was brought in to clear up misunderstandings or uncertainties about the rules, and now he's there to give an opinion on every decision and basically call into question what the referee is doing by someone who's retired 5 years hence, 10 years hence, who's still knows these guys but isn't intimately involved on a day-to-day basis with what their decision-making processes are now, 10 years further on from when he was involved. So it is there as just a narrative driving vehicle to create a controversy, and you see it a lot in association football, but that's huge. So that's going to be all over the papers, all over everything. We're a small sport, and all we're doing is getting everyone fighting against each other and getting everyone to think the referees are completely inept and useless, when actually the referees now are equally as capable, if not more capable, than all the referees from the past. The referee in a different game that's harder to referee, both on the field because of the speed of the players, and because players seem to be starting to cheat more. There was a piece in this month's Rugby League World from Richard Silverwood where he's basically saying the players are starting to make fools out of us more often than even when he was refereeing from 2 years ago. He thinks watching the game that's moved on loads. And similarly, they're under more scrutiny. It's a harder game to referee because everyone can question the decisions now, because you can actually see them in ultra clear high definition, as opposed to, say, you watch a game from the 80s and it was fully covered in terms of more than one camera angle, but it was all grainy. It was all a bit blurry. The amount of times the ball came out of the scrum dodgily back in those days from footage I watch, and yet nothing was ever called of it. Well, now, if that happened, Sky would be doing a deconstruction of the scrum, and it's not right, and that's what. And then to try and elevate that controversy even higher, they ask the referee, they ask the coaches the questions, and thankfully, people might hate Sean Wayne and stuff like that, but thankfully, he doesn't rise to it very often. Whereas other coaches just jump on, don't give a shit about the rules, Darryl Powell, and slag the referees off, even after they've had a chance to review the replays. But yeah, other coaches do jump at the chance to criticise the referee. Like, how many times did we notice Justin Albrook blaming the referee anytime St Helens lost last year? Luckily this year they've not had too many defeats to have that be an issue.
It might come out again.
But all the coaches do it, and I think in his halftime comments he kind of raised the question of the penalty count. So Angela Powers, his interpretation of that, so that she delivered to the audience watching, was that Sean Wayne was saying Wigan aren't getting a fair share of the penalties. But that's not what his comments were. His comments were, we need to sort out our discipline because the penalty count is getting out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, there won't be... I can probably count on my one hand the number of games I think have been significantly influenced by a referee. And as a Bradford fan, you can look at the Millennium Stadium and the debacle about that,